In the heart of Silicon Valley, where dreams are built with lines of code and innovative ideas, there lived a man who started with nothing but a borrowed laptop and an old garage. Mr. Chen wasn't born into money, far from it. His parents owned a small grocery store, and he spent his childhood stocking shelves and doing homework between helping customers. But he had something special, a burning desire to create technology that would change lives. 25 years ago, he would stay up until 3 a.m., surviving on instant noodles and coffee, coding what would become one of the world's most used apps. His friends thought he was crazy, his girlfriend left him, and his parents worried he was throwing his life away. But he kept going. That tiny garage operation? It grew into Tech Future Industries, now worth over $10 billion. The app he created helped millions of people connect with healthcare providers instantly, something that seemed impossible back then. His company expanded into artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and even space technology. But life has a way of throwing curveballs even at billionaires. Last month, sitting in his doctor's office, Mr. Chen received news that shook his world. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months to live at most. The man who had solved so many problems with technology now faced something he couldn't fix with code or money. This news would have broken many people, but not Mr. Chen. Instead, it made him think hard about his legacy. He had 2 children, his biological son, who grew up with every privilege imaginable, and his adopted child, who came into his life through an unexpected twist of fate during a business trip to a rural area. Looking out from his office window at the sprawling tech campus he built, Mr. Chen knew he had to make the hardest decision of his life. Who would carry forward his life's work? Who truly understood the value of what he built? His mind wandered back to all the moments he'd watched both his children grow up, their choices, their actions, their hearts. The press speculated wildly about the future of Tech Future Industries. Business magazines ran stories about the upcoming succession battle. Wall Street analysts made predictions about stock prices. But they all missed the real story, the story of a father who had quietly been watching, learning, and planning. Mr. Chen pulled out an old leather journal from his desk drawer. Inside were notes he'd been keeping for years about both his children. Little moments that might have seemed unimportant to others, but to him they revealed character. He had been running the longest job interview in history, and only he knew the results. The security guard walking past his office that night saw him still at his desk, writing something. The guard would later tell reporters that Mr. Chen had tears in his eyes but was smiling. What no one knew was that he had just finished writing the letter that would change everything. A letter that would be read after his death. That night, as the city lights twinkled below his office window, Mr. Chen made peace with his decision. He knew it would shock everyone. He knew it would cause chaos. But he also knew it was right. His company had never been about money, it was about making the world better. And now he had to make sure it stayed that way. Before heading home, he looked one last time at the 2 framed photos on his desk, his children at their college graduations. One picture showed a celebration at an expensive restaurant, the other a small family gathering at home. These photos held clues to his decision, but nobody would understand until it was revealed. The tale of Mr. Chen's 2 children couldn't have been more different. His biological son lived in a luxury penthouse overlooking Central Park, paid for by his trust fund. Every morning he'd wake up at noon, have his personal chef prepare a fancy breakfast, and spend hours deciding which exotic car to drive that day. His Instagram feed looked like a mix between a luxury magazine and a party photographer's portfolio. The young man had grown up getting everything he wanted. When he was 10, he asked for a pony. By evening, there were 3 in the family stable. At 16, he crashed his first Ferrari. His father's insurance covered it without a word. Through college, he never had to worry about student loans or part-time jobs. His biggest concern was which exclusive club to visit on weekends. But life isn't just about what you're given, it's about what you do with it. The son had started 5 different companies, all funded by his father's money. There was the premium water brand sourced from exclusive glaciers. It failed when journalists discovered it was just filtered tap water. Then came the cryptocurrency called Young Money. It crashed within months, leaving many investors angry. Each venture ended in expensive lawsuits that his father's legal team had to clean up. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment across town, Mr. Chen's adopted child lived a completely different life. Taking the bus to work each morning, carrying a homemade lunch, and staying late at the office not because anyone asked, but because of genuine passion for the work. This child had joined the company at the very bottom, in the mailroom. Everyone thought the adopted child would use the family connection to skip straight to the top. Instead, they refused any special treatment. "I want to learn every part of this business," they told the HR manager during the job interview. "I want to understand how everything works from the ground up." The other employees were skeptical at first, but that changed quickly. Within 6 months, the mailroom had a new digital tracking system that saved hours of work each day. It was designed late at night, after regular working hours. A year later, they had moved up to customer service, where they created a new training program that reduced customer complaints by 40%. Each promotion was earned through hard work and innovation, never through the family name. The differences became even clearer at company events. The biological son would show up late, if at all, usually heading straight for the open bar and leaving early. The adopted child would arrive early to help set up, know every employee's name, and stay until the end to help clean up. Small things, but people noticed. One day, a major crisis hit the company. A critical system crashed, threatening to shut down services for millions of users. The biological son was unreachable, partying on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. But the adopted child was there within minutes of the first alarm, working alongside the tech team for 36 straight hours until the problem was fixed. They even ordered pizza for everyone and knew exactly how each team member liked their coffee. Mr. Chen watched all of this from his office. He saw how his biological son's name appeared more often in gossip columns than business news, usually for all the wrong reasons. He noticed how the adopted child was mentioned in internal reports, patent applications, and grateful emails from employees and customers. 2 different paths, 2 different futures. The old businessman kept a special drawer in his desk. Inside were 2 folders. One was filled with bills from lawyers, angry letters from business partners, and tabloid clippings about scandals. The other contained thank you notes from employees, brilliant business proposals, and community service awards. Each folder told a story about his children's choices. As Mr. Chen's illness progressed, rumors started flying around the company. Everyone wondered about the future. The biological son began showing up at the office more often, suddenly interested in learning the family business. The adopted child just kept working as usual, staying focused on their projects and their teams. Neither knew that their father had already made his decision, a decision that would soon shock everyone. Let's talk about what happened last summer, the incident that nearly destroyed everything Mr. Chen had built. His biological son had been drinking at an exclusive rooftop bar when he got an idea. He decided to show off by announcing a new revolutionary project from Tech Future Industries. The problem? The project didn't exist. The next morning, the company's stock dropped by 30%. Millions of dollars vanished in hours. Emergency meetings were called. PR teams scrambled to control the damage. The son, he was still asleep, his phone turned off, completely unaware of the chaos he'd caused. Mr. Chen had to step in personally to fix the mess. He spent 3 days straight in meetings with investors, board members, and reporters. His doctors had told him to rest, but instead, he was cleaning up after his son again. The whole incident cost the company $50 million in lost value and damaged trust. But this wasn't the first time. There was the charity gala where the son showed up drunk and insulted their biggest business partner. The time he borrowed confidential company data to impress a date. The yacht party that turned into a PR nightmare when photos leaked online. Each time, his father's team would rush in to minimize the damage. The pattern started early. In high school, teachers were paid to look the other way when he cheated on tests. In college, huge donations mysteriously appeared whenever his grades slipped too low. His father hoped each time that this would be the lesson that changed him. It never was. The son had a talent for making expensive mistakes. He once lost $2 million in a single night at a casino in Monaco. Another time, he invested $5 million of the company's money in his friend's revolutionary app idea, which turned out to be a copied version of an existing product. The lawyers worked overtime to settle these cases quietly. What troubled Mr. Chen most wasn't the money. He could afford the losses. It was watching his son refuse to learn from these mistakes. Every failure was somebody else's fault. Every problem had a quick fix, usually involving his father's checkbook. He lived in a bubble where actions never had real consequences. The company's old-timers remembered when the son was little, visiting the office with his father. He'd run through the halls, fascinated by everything, asking endless questions about how things worked. Somewhere along the way, that curious little boy had turned into someone who cared more about looking successful than actually achieving anything. Mr. Chen tried everything. He set up mentoring programs with top executives. He sent his son to the best business schools. He even tried tough love, cutting off the money until certain conditions were met. Nothing stuck. The son would make promises, show improvement for a few weeks, then slide back into his old ways. The last straw came during a crucial board meeting. The son was supposed to present a new business strategy he'd been working on. Everyone hoped this would be his moment to show leadership potential. Instead, he walked in 45 minutes late, clearly hungover, with a presentation he'd copied from the internet. The board members exchanged worried looks. Mr. Chen's heart sank. That evening, alone in his office, Mr. Chen pulled out an old family photo. In it, his son was 6 years old, sitting on his lap in front of their first company computer. Both were smiling, full of dreams about the future. The photo was taken the same year they adopted their second child. Looking at it now, Mr. Chen realized something important. Love sometimes means making hard choices. He opened his laptop and began typing a letter, one that would change everything. As he wrote, he thought about his legacy, about the thousands of employees who depended on the company, about the responsibility of wealth. His son needed to learn the hardest lesson of all, that true worth isn't inherited, it's earned. The decision he was about to make would either destroy his son completely or finally help him grow up. While the biological son was making headlines for all the wrong reasons, Mr. Chen's adopted child was quietly changing the company from within. Remember that crisis when the company's systems crashed? Well, that wasn't the whole story. After working those 36 hours straight to fix the problem, they spent the next month building a completely new backup system to make sure it never happened again. Nobody asked them to do it. They did it because they saw a problem that needed fixing. That's who they were, always looking for ways to make things better, not for praise or attention, but because it was the right thing to do. Their journey through the company was like reading a good book, each chapter better than the last. After starting in the mailroom, they moved to customer service, then project management, and finally became head of innovation. But here's the interesting part. They still had lunch with the mailroom staff every Thursday. "Never forget where you started," they'd say with a smile. One day, a young intern was struggling with a project. Most executives would have just assigned someone else. Instead, the adopted child stayed late for 2 weeks, teaching the intern everything they knew. That intern later created a program that saved the company millions. When people praised the idea, the adopted child made sure everyone knew it was the intern's work. They had this special way of seeing potential in everything and everyone. There was the cleaning lady who mentioned her son was good with computers. The adopted child set up a coding club after work hours, teaching kids from the maintenance staff's families how to program. 5 of those kids now work for the company as developers. But their biggest achievement wasn't about technology at all. It was about people. They started a program called Future Builders that gave scholarships to foster kids who wanted to work in tech. When asked why, their answer was simple: "Someone gave me a chance once. I'm just passing it on." The program started small, just 3 students in the first year. But it grew. Today, over 200 former foster kids are studying technology because of it. The adopted child used their own bonus money to fund the first scholarships, never telling anyone, not even Mr. Chen. He only found out when the company accountant mentioned it by accident. Their office looked different from other executive spaces. Instead of expensive art, the walls were covered with thank you letters from employees they'd helped, pictures of scholarship students graduating, and sticky notes with ideas for new projects. A small desk plant, given by the maintenance team on their birthday, sat in the corner. It's not much, they'd been told, but we all pitched in. That plant meant more to them than any luxury gift. Even when handling tough situations, they showed unusual wisdom. When a competitor tried to steal one of their biggest projects, instead of going to court, they suggested a partnership. That partnership now brings in $300 million a year. The competitor's CEO later admitted, "They saw an opportunity where we only saw conflict." Mr. Chen watched all this from a distance. He saw how his adopted child built trust, solved problems, and helped others grow. They weren't just running a business, they were building a community. Every decision showed an understanding of what his company was really about, using technology to make lives better. Late one evening, Mr. Chen received an email. His adopted child had been offered a CEO position at another company with double the salary. The email was a courtesy notice. They were turning it down. The reason? This company is family. You don't leave family for money. Reading that email in his dimly lit office, Mr. Chen felt tears in his eyes. He remembered the day he first met them, a quiet kid with determined eyes in a small orphanage. People had questioned his decision to adopt then. Now, years later, as he looked at the empire he'd built and thought about its future, he knew he'd made the right choice. Twice. First in adopting them, and now in what he was about to do. The day Mr. Chen made his final decision started like any other. His driver picked him up at 7 a.m., his coffee was waiting on his desk, and his calendar was full of meetings. But something was different. The doctors had given him news the day before. His time was shorter than expected. 3 months, maybe less. He sat in his office, looking at the city skyline he'd watched change over 30 years. The morning sun reflected off buildings his company had helped design. Somewhere down there, thousands of people were using apps his team had created. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about responsibility. His lawyer arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying the documents they'd been working on for weeks. "Aren't you sure about this?" the lawyer asked, placing the papers on the desk. "It's going to cause quite a storm." Mr. Chen just nodded. He'd never been more sure of anything in his life. The numbers were clear. His fortune was worth $4.2 billion. The company itself was valued at $10 billion. Most people expected him to split it equally between his children or give everything to his biological son. That's what tradition would suggest. But Mr. Chen had never been one to follow tradition blindly. He thought about the company's 5,000 employees, the families that depended on their jobs, the millions of customers who trusted their services, the future projects that could change lives. This wasn't a decision about inheritance, it was about legacy. Taking out his favorite pen, the same one he used to sign his first business contract, he began to write. His hand shook slightly, but his mind was clear. The adopted child would receive 80% of his personal fortune and controlling interest in the company. The biological son would get several properties and a trust fund, enough to live comfortably, but not enough to cause more damage. But Mr. Chen wasn't just signing papers. He was also recording videos, one for each child, explaining his decision. He talked about watching them grow up, about their choices, their actions. He spoke about responsibility, about earning trust, about understanding the true value of money. These weren't angry messages or lectures. They were a father's final lessons to his children. In his son's video, he remembered their fishing trips, the baseball games, the happy moments. "I'm not doing this to punish you," he explained. "I'm doing this because I love you enough to stop protecting you from the consequences of your actions." He included a special clause. If his son could prove himself responsible over 5 years, he could earn a larger role in the company. For his adopted child, the message was different. He talked about watching them grow, about their quiet strength, their wisdom in handling power. "You never asked for any of this," he said, "which is exactly why you deserve it." He included instructions about the company's future, about taking care of the employees, about maintaining the values they both believed in. The lawyer raised one last concern. What about the press? The public? This could become a huge scandal. Mr. Chen smiled and pulled out a thick folder. Inside were documents showing every major decision both children had made over the years. Every success, every failure, every choice. "The truth speaks for itself," he said. He had one more surprise prepared. Along with the will, he created a foundation, one that would focus on giving opportunities to foster children who showed promise in technology and business. A significant portion of the company's profits would go there. It was his way of multiplying the same chance he'd given his adopted child. As the sun set that evening, Mr. Chen stood at his office window one last time. Tomorrow, he would check into the hospital for his final rounds of treatment. The decisions were made, the papers were signed, the videos recorded. He felt at peace. This wasn't just about money or business anymore, it was about doing what was right. Looking at the family photo on his desk, taken years ago at a company picnic, he whispered, "Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one." He picked up his briefcase, turned off the lights, and walked out of his office, knowing he'd made the decision his company, his legacy, and his conscience needed. 2 weeks after Mr. Chen passed away, the family gathered in the main conference room of Tech Future Industries. The room was thick with tension. The biological son sat on one side, wearing an expensive suit and dark sunglasses, even though they were indoors. The adopted child sat quietly on the other side, in their usual simple business attire. The company's head lawyer cleared his throat and began reading the will. As the words filled the room, the son's face turned from confidence to shock, then to anger. He stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "This has to be a joke," he shouted. "I'm his real child. This company is my birthright." But that was just the beginning. Within hours, news of the inheritance hit the media. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire snubs son for adopted child." The son hired the city's most expensive lawyers and threatened to contest the will. He gave interviews to anyone who would listen, claiming his adopted sibling had brainwashed their father. The company's stock started dropping as investors worried about the future. The biological son's supporters started an online campaign calling for a boycott of the company's products. Some old-fashioned board members mumbled about blood being thicker than water. The adopted child stayed silent through it all, continuing to work as usual. When reporters ambushed them in the parking lot, they simply said, "I respect my father's decision, and I respect my brother's right to feel hurt. But this isn't about us, it's about the 5,000 families who depend on this company." Then came the videos. Nobody except the lawyer knew about them. The first one played during an emergency board meeting. There was Mr. Chen looking straight into the camera, explaining every reason behind his decision. He showed documents, photographs, and evidence of everything that had happened over the years. The biological son's face went pale as the video played. His father calmly described the casino losses, the failed businesses, the scandals, but also expressed hope that his son would learn and grow from this experience. "I'm not taking away your future," Mr. Chen's voice said. "I'm giving you a chance to earn it." More videos emerged over the next few days. There was one showing the adopted child working late nights on company projects, years of quiet dedication captured on security cameras. Another showed the son's outbursts in board meetings, his reckless decisions, the damage he caused. But the most powerful video was the last one. In it, Mr. Chen sat in his garden, looking tired but peaceful. He talked about what success really means. "It's not about being born into the right family," he said. "It's about what you do with the opportunities you're given. I didn't build this company with a silver spoon. I built it with hard work, integrity, and care for others. That's the legacy I want to pass on." The public's opinion began to shift. Employees started sharing stories about both children. They talked about how the adopted child had helped their careers, listened to their ideas, supported their families through tough times. Others shared stories about the son's arrogant behavior, his disrespect for workers, his sense of entitlement. The final blow came when the son's own lawyers, after seeing all the evidence, advised him to drop the case. "Your father made this legally bulletproof," they told him. "Fighting it will only waste your money and damage your reputation further." 1 month after the will reading, the son held a press conference. Everyone expected more accusations, more anger. Instead, he looked different, humbled, maybe even a little lost. "I've spent my whole life thinking I deserved everything," he said, his voice shaking. Maybe my father's final lesson was that I needed to learn how to earn things instead." As he left the podium, his adopted sibling was waiting. No cameras caught their private conversation, but witnesses saw something unexpected: tears, a long hug, and what looked like the beginning of understanding. Sometimes the biggest inheritances aren't measured in dollars, but in lessons learned. 1 year after Mr. Chen's passing, something extraordinary happened at Tech Future Industries' main building. The company was hosting its first Future Builders Foundation graduation ceremony. The auditorium was packed with people from all walks of life, employees, press, and most surprisingly, both of Mr. Chen's children sitting together in the front row. The adopted child, now CEO, stood at the podium looking out at the 100 foster children who'd received scholarships that year. But before announcing the graduates, they had a different announcement to make. Today, we're not just celebrating these amazing students, we're also welcoming a new member to our foundation's board of directors, my brother. The biological son walked onto the stage, but he wasn't wearing his usual designer suit. Instead, he wore a simple business outfit, much like the other employees. The whispers in the audience grew. Nobody had expected this. Over the past year, he disappeared from the public eye. Now they knew why. When my father's will was read, he began, his voice humble, "I thought I'd lost everything. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost anything, because I'd never really earned anything to begin with." He paused, looking at the young faces in the crowd. "This past year, I went back to school. I completed my business degree. But more importantly, I started at the bottom of a small tech company, using a different name, experiencing what it's like to actually work for success." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. He continued, "I learned more in 1 year of earning minimum wage than I did in all my years of luxury. I learned what my father tried to teach me all along, that true worth isn't in your bank account, it's in what you give back to others." His adopted sibling then revealed the next surprise. The foundation wasn't just offering scholarships anymore. They were starting a complete mentorship program where successful business leaders would guide foster children through their education and early careers. The biological son would lead this program, using his own journey from entitled heir to earn success as a teaching tool. But the biggest surprise came next. The adopted CEO announced that they were using part of their inheritance to create a special investment fund. This fund would help former foster children start their own businesses. "My father gave me a chance," they said, "and now we're going to multiply that chance 1,000 times over." The ceremony continued with the graduation. Each student had a story. One had developed a new app to help foster families communicate better. Another had created a system to connect homeless youth with job opportunities. They weren't just getting degrees, they were already changing lives. As the graduates received their certificates, something remarkable happened. The biological son, who once couldn't be bothered to learn employees' names, knew every student's story. He'd been secretly mentoring several of them, sharing not just business knowledge, but also his own story of transformation. Near the end of the ceremony, they played one final video clip of Mr. Chen, one that nobody had seen before. In it, he was sitting in his garden, much younger, on the day he brought his adopted child home. "Today I learned something," he said, smiling at the camera. "Family isn't about blood. It's about love, about choices, about seeing the potential in others and helping them reach it." The video then jumped to his last days, showing him in his hospital room. "If you're watching this," he said weakly but smiling, "it means both my children have finally understood what I've always known, that true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give. And that's sometimes the greatest